You check your bank account 3 times before making any significant purchase. You calculate and recalculate. You research every investment option until your eyes hurt. You pride yourself on being financially responsible, financially smart. Yet deep down, you know something is missing. Despite all your knowledge, despite all your careful planning, money still feels like a mystery that controls you more than you control it. I am Solomon, and I accumulated more wealth than any man before or since. But here is what I learned that no financial advisor will ever tell you. The difference between those who build lasting wealth and those who struggle forever has nothing to do with how much they know about markets, interest rates, or investment strategies. It has everything to do with understanding the invisible forces that drive every single financial decision you make. Your childhood, your fears, your definition of enough, the stories you tell yourself about what money means and what it can do for you. In the next 20 minutes, you will not become someone who simply makes better financial decisions. You will become someone who understands why you make the decisions you make. You will see the hidden patterns that have been controlling your relationship with money your entire life. You will discover why Warren Buffett, with average returns, accumulated more wealth than investors with far superior performance. You will understand why your emotions, not your intelligence, determine your financial destiny. This is not another video about budgeting or investment tips. This is about transforming your identity from someone who manages money to someone who truly understands it. From someone who fears financial decisions to someone who makes them with clarity and confidence. The psychology of money reveals why the poorest decisions often make perfect sense, why the richest people in history followed patterns you can replicate, and why your biggest financial breakthrough will come not from learning more, but from understanding what you already know in a completely different way. If you are ready to stop fighting against your own financial instincts and start working with them, if you want to join the thousands of people who have already begun this transformation, subscribe now. Because what you are about to learn will change not just how you handle money, but how you see yourself in relationship to wealth, security, and the life you truly want to create. Number 1, human nature and money. You sit at your desk, staring at investment options, your heart racing slightly as you consider where to put your hard-earned money. Logic tells you one thing, but something deeper, something more primal, whispers another. You tell yourself you are being rational, that you are making calculated decisions based on data and research. But if you are honest, truly honest, you know that every financial choice you have ever made has been filtered through a lens of emotion that you rarely acknowledge. This is the fundamental truth about money that no financial advisor will ever tell you directly. Your relationship with money is not governed by spreadsheets or market analysis. It is governed by the deepest parts of your human nature, by fears and hopes that were planted in your mind long before you ever earned your first dollar. I have observed this truth across millennia, watching as the same patterns repeat themselves in different forms. The merchant who hoards gold because his father lost everything in war. The investor who avoids all risk because she watched her mother cry over empty accounts. The entrepreneur who gambles everything because he grew up believing that security is an illusion. Picture money not as numbers on a screen, but as a mirror reflecting every significant emotional experience you have ever had. Every argument your parents had about bills, every time you felt shame about not having enough, every moment you believed that more money would solve the problems that money could never actually solve. Consider the story of 2 brothers I once knew, both raised in the same household, both given the same education about finances. One became obsessively frugal, saving every coin, never spending on anything beyond basic necessities. The other became a chronic spender, unable to hold onto money for more than a few weeks. Logic would suggest they should have similar approaches to money, having learned from the same sources. But each brother had processed their childhood differently. The frugal brother remembered most clearly the nights when their father would pace the floors, worried about making payments. He learned that money disappearing meant danger, meant sleepless nights, meant the adults in his life becoming anxious and irritable. For him, holding onto money became a form of emotional protection. The spender remembered most vividly the rare occasions when their family had extra money, how those were the only times his parents seemed truly happy, truly relaxed. For him, money was meant to be converted immediately into those precious moments of joy and relief. Neither brother was wrong, neither was irrational. Each had developed a coherent system based on the emotional data they had collected throughout their formative years. This is the turning point that changes everything about how you understand financial behavior. Once you recognize that money decisions are emotional decisions dressed up in logical clothing, you stop judging yourself for not being perfectly rational. You stop comparing your choices to what others might do. You start understanding that successful financial behavior is not about finding the one correct way to handle money. It is about finding the way that works with your emotional reality, not against it. The practical wisdom here is profound. Before making any significant financial decision, pause and ask yourself what you are really afraid of. What are you really hoping for? What childhood memory or adult trauma is influencing your choice? When you understand the emotional foundation of your decision, you can make adjustments that honor both your feelings and your goals. Your money is never just about money. It is about every story you have ever told yourself about security, success, worth, and survival. Number 2, life experience and financial perception. You were born into a specific moment in economic history, and that moment shaped your financial DNA in ways you have never fully understood. The decade you came of age in, the economic conditions your parents lived through, the first major financial news you remember hearing. All of these have created the lens through which you see every investment opportunity, every risk, every potential reward. This is not merely interesting trivia about personal development. This is the key to understanding why intelligent people make dramatically different financial choices when presented with identical information. Their experiences have taught them to see different realities. Think of economic experience as a language learned in childhood. If you grew up during a period of economic growth, your financial vocabulary includes words like opportunity, expansion, and inevitable progress. If you came of age during recession or instability, your vocabulary emphasizes words like caution, protection, and unpredictable danger. Imagine two individuals, both intelligent, both educated, both presented with the same investment opportunity. The first person was born in 1970. During their formative financial years, they witnessed the longest bull market in history. The stock market, from their perspective, was a machine that turned time into wealth. Risk, to them, meant missing out on gains. The second person was born in 1950. Their formative financial years included stagflation, oil crises, and market stagnation. From their perspective, the stock market was a gambling device that could wipe out decades of savings in a matter of months. Risk, to them, meant losing what they had already accumulated. Present these two people with an aggressive investment strategy, and they will have completely different emotional and intellectual responses. Not because one is smarter than the other, but because their lived experience has taught them different lessons about what money does and how it behaves. I once knew a merchant who lived through the Great Plague. Every business decision he made afterward was influenced by that experience of watching thriving markets collapse overnight. He could never fully embrace opportunities that required significant upfront investment, even when the potential returns were extraordinary. His friends called him overly cautious, but his caution was not character flaw. It was the logical result of having learned that prosperity could vanish without warning. Years later, his son, who had grown up during a time of recovery and growth, would make bold investments that his father found terrifying. The son was not more courageous than his father. He had simply learned different lessons about what was possible and what was dangerous. The transformation begins when you recognize that your financial instincts are not universal truths. They are personal truths, shaped by the specific sequence of events that formed your understanding of how money works. This recognition frees you from the burden of believing that your way of thinking about money is the only rational way. More importantly, it allows you to deliberately expose yourself to different perspectives and different time horizons. If your experience has made you overly cautious, you can consciously study periods of growth and expansion. If your experience has made you overly aggressive, you can deliberately study periods of loss and contraction. The practical application is to audit your financial beliefs regularly. When you find yourself absolutely certain that a particular approach is obviously correct, pause and ask what experiences taught you that certainty. Then seek out the experiences of people who lived through different economic periods, who learned different lessons. Your financial worldview is not your destiny, it is your starting point. Number 3, time and compound interest. You have heard about compound interest countless times, but you have never truly felt its power because feeling it requires a kind of patience that goes against every instinct of modern life. You want results now. You want to see progress immediately. You want your efforts to translate into visible wealth within months or years, not decades. This impatience is the single greatest barrier between you and true wealth. Because compound interest is not just a mathematical concept, it is a philosophical principle that rewards those who can align their actions with time scales that extend far beyond their immediate desires. Picture a tree growing in your backyard. For the first 5 years, its growth seems almost insignificant. A few inches taller each year, a handful of new branches, barely noticeable changes that hardly justify the water and attention you give it. But by year 20, that tree has become a towering presence that provides shade, increases your property value, and creates a legacy that will outlive you. Compound interest works exactly like that tree, except that most people give up watering it after the first few seasons because the growth seems too slow, too small, too unremarkable. Warren Buffett understood this better than perhaps any human in history. His wealth story is not about brilliant stock picks or market timing genius. It is about starting early and never stopping. When people analyze Buffett's success, they focus on his annual returns, which averaged around 22%. Impressive, but not miraculous. What they miss is the miraculous part, the part that created most of his wealth. Buffett began investing seriously in his 20s. By the time he reached 65, he had accumulated significant wealth, but nothing compared to what was coming. Between age 65 and his current age, his wealth grew from a few billion to over $80 billion. The majority of his fortune was created not during his brilliant middle years, but during his patient later years, when decades of compound growth finally reached the steep part of the exponential curve. Consider the mathematics of this patience. If Buffett had achieved the exact same 22% annual returns, but had started investing at age 30 instead of in his 20s, his net worth today would be 99.9% smaller. Nearly identical skill and performance, but dramatically different outcomes, all because of a few extra years at the beginning of the process. This is where most people's understanding of wealth creation goes wrong. They think wealth is built through high returns, through finding the right investment, through timing the market perfectly. But wealth is actually built through time, through the boring, invisible process of allowing small amounts to grow into larger amounts, which then grow into even larger amounts. The turning point comes when you stop trying to accelerate compound interest and start serving it instead. Instead of looking for ways to double your money quickly, you look for ways to ensure your money never stops growing. Instead of chasing high returns, you chase consistency and longevity. The practical wisdom is to think of compound interest as a partnership with time itself. Your job is not to be brilliant or lucky. Your job is to be patient and consistent. Start with whatever amount you have now, even if it seems small. Add to it regularly, even if the additions seem insignificant. Protect it from your own impatience, even when the growth seems slower than you hoped. Time is the secret ingredient that transforms modest efforts into extraordinary outcomes, but only for those wise enough to let it work. Number 4, investment comparisons. You have been taught to worship intelligence and skill above all else, to believe that the smartest person with the best strategy will always win. This belief has led you to chase performance, to seek out the highest returns, to admire the investors with the most impressive annual gains. But this worship of brilliance has blinded you to a more powerful truth about wealth creation. Jim Simons is arguably the most successful investor in modern history when measured by annual returns. His hedge fund averaged 66% returns per year for decades, a performance so extraordinary that it seems almost supernatural. Warren Buffett, in comparison, averaged a mere 22% annually. By every measure of investment skill, Simons was the superior investor. Yet Buffett's net worth dwarfs Simons' wealth by billions of dollars. How is this possible? How can the better performer have less to show for their brilliance? The answer reveals the most counterintuitive truth about building wealth. Excellence matters far less than endurance. Brilliance matters far less than time in the game. Imagine two runners in a race. The first runner is faster, more skilled, more naturally gifted. But he starts the race several hours after the second runner begins. The second runner is slower, less impressive to watch, but he has been moving steadily forward since dawn. When the day ends, the slower runner who started earlier will be far ahead of the brilliant runner who started late. Simons' extraordinary returns came largely after he had already passed middle age. His peak earning years coincided with what should have been his retirement years. Buffett, meanwhile, had been compounding wealth since his 20s, giving his modest returns decades more time to work their magic. The mathematics of this difference are staggering. If Simons had somehow achieved his 66% returns starting from the same young age as Buffett, his wealth today would exceed $63 quintillion. A number so large it defies comprehension. More money than exists in the entire global economy. This thought experiment reveals the hidden power of time over talent. Given enough years, even modest performance creates results that brilliant performance cannot match if it starts too late. This understanding changes everything about how you approach wealth building. Instead of searching for the perfect investment or the highest returns, you search for consistency and early starts. Instead of comparing yourself to the most impressive performers, you compare yourself to the most patient accumulators. The story of these two investors teaches us that wealth is not a sprint where the fastest wins, but rather an endurance test where those who can continue moving forward for the longest time ultimately triumph. The turning point is when you stop trying to be the smartest investor and start trying to be the most persistent investor. Stop looking for the next big opportunity and start maximizing the time you give your current opportunities to grow. Practically, this means starting now, regardless of how small your starting amount might be. It means choosing boring, consistent strategies over exciting, high-risk approaches. It means measuring success not by annual returns, but by years in the market. The race goes not to the swift, but to those who can keep running long after others have grown tired and quit. Number 5, tail events and rare outcomes. You have been conditioned to believe that success comes from avoiding failures, from making good decisions consistently, from maintaining a high batting average in your choices. This conditioning has made you afraid of failure, afraid of loss, afraid of the many small disappointments that seem to indicate you are not performing well. But this fear of failure has hidden from you one of the most powerful wealth creation principles in existence. Most of your returns, most of your success, most of your wealth will come not from your average performance, but from a small number of extraordinary outcomes that will emerge from a much larger number of ordinary or even poor outcomes. Picture an art collector walking through galleries, purchasing painting after painting, sculpture after sculpture. Most of what he buys will prove to be worth less than he paid. Some will become worthless. A few will hold their value. But one or two pieces will become legendary, increasing in value by thousands of %, creating wealth that dwarfs all his other investments combined. This was the exact experience of Heinz Berggruen, who built one of the most valuable private art collections in history. His wealth did not come from being right about most of his purchases. It came from being spectacularly right about a few key pieces, while being willing to be wrong about many others. The same principle governs the technology companies that shape our modern world. Amazon, which seems like an inevitable success story today, was built on a foundation of countless failures. For every Prime or AWS that generates billions in profit, there were dozens of products and services that lost money and disappeared. Fire phones, grocery stores, fashion lines, restaurant delivery services, most of Amazon's ventures failed completely. Yet those few extraordinary successes were so successful that they made all the failures irrelevant. Amazon's Prime and AWS services alone generated enough value to place the company among the most valuable in history, despite being surrounded by a graveyard of abandoned projects. This is the nature of tail events, the small number of extraordinary outcomes that generate the majority of returns. In venture capital, they expect 9 out of 10 investments to fail completely, because the one success will generate returns that make up for all the failures and create substantial profit besides. The comedy special you watch on Netflix represents thousands of jokes that were tried and discarded, hundreds of performances that went poorly, dozens of ideas that seemed promising but ultimately did not work. What you see as the finished product is not representative of the process that created it. It is the rare tail outcome that emerged from a much larger body of experimentation. This understanding changes how you think about failure and success in your own life. Your failures are not evidence that you are bad at making decisions. They are the necessary foundation from which your few extraordinary successes will emerge. The turning point comes when you stop trying to avoid all failures and start positioning yourself to benefit from tail events. This means making many small bets rather than one big bet. It means being willing to be wrong frequently in order to be spectacularly right occasionally. Practically, this applies to your investments, your career choices, your skill development, and your relationships. Diversify your efforts. Try many things. Do not judge your overall performance by your average outcomes, but by your best outcomes. Build a life designed to capture the rare, extraordinary events that will define your wealth and happiness, even if that means accepting many ordinary or disappointing events along the way. The magic is not in avoiding failure, but in failing your way to the few successes that will make all the failures worthwhile. Number 6, risk, luck, and uncertainty. You plan meticulously, work diligently, make careful decisions, and then wonder why your outcomes do not match your efforts. You see others who seem less deserving achieve greater success, and you feel frustrated by the apparent randomness of results. This frustration comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world actually works. Success is never purely about merit, and failure is never purely about mistakes. Every achievement sits at the intersection of preparation and luck, of skill and circumstances beyond anyone's control. Until you understand this intersection, you will either credit yourself too much for your successes or blame yourself too much for your failures. Consider the story of Bill Gates, whose path to becoming one of the wealthiest people in history began with a stroke of extraordinary luck that he had no control over. In 1968, when Gates was 13 years old, he enrolled at Lakeside School, a private preparatory school in Seattle. That school had just purchased one of the first computer terminals available to high schools in the United States. At that time, fewer than 1 in a million students worldwide had access to a computer. Gates happened to be one of them, not because of any personal merit or exceptional foresight, but because his parents could afford private school tuition, and that particular school made a forward-thinking technology purchase. This access allowed Gates to develop programming skills years before most of his peers even knew what a computer was. By the time personal computers became commercially viable, he had already accumulated thousands of hours of experience. His skill was genuine, his work ethic was real, but his opportunity was pure luck. Now consider Kent Evans, Gates' closest friend at Lakeside, and by many accounts even more brilliant than Gates himself. Evans was also passionate about computers, also driven to succeed, also developing advanced programming skills. If merit alone determined outcomes, Evans should have achieved similar success. But Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident during his senior year of high school. All his intelligence, all his potential, all his preparation became irrelevant in an instant. Risk, the dark twin of luck, had intervened in the most permanent way possible. This is not a story about tragedy. It is a story about reality. The same forces that can elevate you beyond your wildest dreams can also destroy your best-laid plans in moments. Gates succeeded not only because of his intelligence and work ethic, but because he lived long enough for his preparation to meet opportunity. Evans failed not because of any personal deficiency, but because risk claimed him before he could realize his potential. Understanding this does not diminish the importance of preparation, skill, and effort. It actually makes them more important, because you never know when luck will present you with an opportunity or when risk will threaten to take it away. The transformation comes when you start planning for both luck and risk, rather than pretending they do not exist. This means building redundancy into your strategies. It means not putting all your hopes on a single outcome. It means being grateful for good fortune without becoming overconfident, and being resilient about setbacks without becoming discouraged. Practically, this means diversifying not just your investments, but your skills, your relationships, your income sources, and your sources of meaning and fulfillment. It means staying prepared for opportunities you cannot predict and staying protected from risks you cannot foresee. Most importantly, it means treating both your successes and your failures as temporary conditions, rather than permanent judgments about your worth or ability. Fortune is a wheel that turns constantly, lifting some up while casting others down, but always continuing to turn. Number 7, the cost of investing. You want the returns that come from investing, but you do not want to pay the price that those returns demand. This contradiction has trapped more people in financial mediocrity than any other single factor. You have been sold the fantasy that wealth creation should feel comfortable, should be predictable, should come without emotional cost. This fantasy has set you up for failure because every investment return comes with a specific emotional price tag, and that price must be paid in full before you can collect your gains. The stock market has delivered an average annual return of approximately 11% over the past 70 years. This sounds like a pleasant, steady growth that should make investors wealthy over time. But this 11% average masks the true cost of earning it. During that same 70-year period, the market experienced multiple crashes, dozens of corrections, thousands of days of stomach-churning volatility. Imagine being told that you can earn 11% annually on your money, but in exchange, you must be willing to watch your account value drop by 20, 30, or even 50% several times per decade. You must be prepared to see headlines declaring that the economy is collapsing, that your investments are worthless, that you should sell everything immediately. You must be able to sleep soundly while financial experts on television explain why this time is different, why recovery is impossible, why you are foolish for staying invested. This emotional turbulence is not an unfortunate side effect of investing. It is the price you pay for returns. Just as you cannot expect to build physical strength without experiencing physical discomfort in the gym, you cannot expect to build wealth without experiencing emotional discomfort in the markets. The tragedy is that most people try to avoid paying this emotional price. They want the returns without the volatility, the growth without the uncertainty, the wealth without the worry. So they buy when markets are calm and sell when markets are turbulent. They try to time their entries and exits to avoid the emotional cost of investing. This strategy is like buying a car and then trying to return it every time you hit traffic. You end up paying all the costs of ownership, but receiving none of the benefits of actually reaching your destination. Think of investment strategies like different types of vehicles. You can buy a new car, which offers good performance with known risks and costs. You can buy a used car, which offers moderate performance with moderate risks and costs. Or you can try to steal a car, which promises high performance with no apparent costs, but ultimately results in devastating consequences. Most failed investment strategies are attempts to steal returns without paying their emotional price. Market timing systems that promise to capture gains while avoiding losses. Complex derivatives that claim to eliminate risk while preserving reward. Investment schemes that guarantee high returns with perfect safety. The turning point comes when you accept that emotional discomfort is not a warning sign that something is wrong with your investment strategy. It is a confirmation that your investment strategy is working as intended. The practical wisdom is to choose your emotional price consciously rather than trying to avoid it entirely. If you cannot tolerate the volatility of stocks, choose bonds and accept lower returns. If you cannot handle the uncertainty of individual companies, choose index funds and accept average performance. But whatever price you choose to pay it completely and consistently. The market rewards those who can endure its emotional demands, not those who try to negotiate better terms. Every fortune was built by someone willing to feel uncomfortable for longer than their competitors could tolerate. Number 8. Optimism versus pessimism. You are bombarded daily with reasons to fear the future, to expect catastrophe, to believe that economic collapse is inevitable. The news media profits from your anxiety, social media amplifies your worries, and your own psychological wiring makes negative information feel more urgent and important than positive information. This constant diet of pessimism has convinced you that caution and fear are signs of intelligence, while optimism and hope are signs of naivety. You have learned to sound smart by predicting problems and to sound foolish by expecting progress. But this bias toward negativity has blinded you to the most consistent trend in human history, the relentless improvement of human conditions over time. While you have been focused on daily crises and short-term setbacks, humanity has been steadily becoming healthier, wealthier, more educated, and more capable of solving its problems. The stock market, over any sufficiently long time period, has reflected this improvement. Despite multiple wars, depressions, political upheavals, and economic crises, the overall trajectory has been upward. Companies have learned to create value, technology has improved productivity, and human ingenuity has found ways to generate prosperity even in the face of significant obstacles. Yet pessimism feels more intelligent because it addresses immediate concerns, while optimism requires faith in trends that play out over decades. When the market crashes, the pessimist can point to their warnings and feel vindicated. When the market recovers and reaches new highs, This vindication is forgotten because the pessimist is already focused on the next potential crisis. This creates a psychological trap where being wrong about disaster feels smarter than being right about progress. I have watched this pattern repeat across centuries. In every generation, intelligent people have found compelling reasons to believe that their particular moment in history represented the beginning of permanent decline. They could always point to specific problems, specific threats, specific reasons why this time was different from all the times before. But the optimists, despite being dismissed as unrealistic, have been proven right by the long arc of history. Not because they ignored problems or refused to acknowledge risks, but because they understood that human creativity and adaptability consistently find ways to solve problems and create value. The story of every major company illustrates this principle. Amazon faced the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, intense competition, regulatory challenges, and countless predictions of its demise. Yet it continued to innovate, adapt, and grow, creating enormous value for its shareholders precisely because it maintained an optimistic view of what was possible. This does not mean that optimism is always rewarded in the short term, or that pessimism is always wrong. Markets do crash, companies do fail, economies do experience setbacks. But over the time horizons that matter for wealth building, optimism aligned with human progress has been the winning strategy. The transformation comes when you learn to distinguish between intelligent caution about specific risks and paralyzing pessimism about general progress. You can be concerned about particular threats while remaining confident about long-term trends. Practically, this means continuing to invest during periods of uncertainty rather than waiting for certainty that never comes. It means focusing more on the long-term trajectory of human improvement than on the short-term fluctuations of markets and economies. It means choosing to bet on human ingenuity and adaptability rather than on human failure and decline. The future belongs to those who can remain optimistic about progress while being realistic about obstacles. Number 9. True wealth and spending discipline. You have confused being rich with being wealthy, and this confusion has led you to make financial choices that actually move you further from financial security rather than closer to it. You have been taught to measure success by income, by possessions, by visible signs of prosperity. But these measurements have trapped you in a cycle where earning more money leads to spending more money, leaving you no closer to actual financial freedom. True wealth is not about how much money you make. True wealth is about how much money you keep, how much you save, how much you accumulate over time. Wealth is invisible, hidden, accumulated rather than displayed. The difference between rich and wealthy is the difference between a river and a lake. A river can have tremendous flow, enormous volumes of water passing through it every day, but the water does not accumulate. A lake may receive less water than a river, but because it holds on to what it receives, it builds depth and reserves that can sustain life even during dry periods. Many people with high incomes live paycheck to paycheck, despite earning amounts that should provide complete financial security. They are like rivers, with money flowing through their lives but never accumulating into lasting wealth. Meanwhile, others with modest incomes build substantial wealth by consistently saving and investing what they earn. This principle becomes clear when you examine the spending patterns of the truly wealthy versus those who simply appear wealthy. The multimillionaire drives a reliable but unremarkable car, lives in a comfortable but not ostentatious home, and spends money on experiences and investments rather than on status symbols. The person trying to appear wealthy drives an expensive car purchased with debt, lives in a house that stretches their budget to its limits, and spends money on things that others will notice rather than on things that will appreciate in value. The path to wealth requires a fundamental shift in how you think about spending. Instead of asking what you can afford, you must ask what you choose to afford. Instead of spending everything you earn and saving what is left over, you must save first and spend what remains. This shift requires discipline that goes against every marketing message, every social pressure, every instinct toward immediate gratification that modern life encourages. You must learn to find satisfaction in accumulation rather than consumption, in building wealth rather than displaying wealth. The practical application is to make saving automatic and spending conscious. Decide what percentage of your income you will save before you decide what to do with the rest. Choose a savings rate that requires you to make real choices about spending, that forces you to distinguish between wants and needs. Most importantly, you must learn to derive satisfaction from your growing net worth rather than from your growing possessions. The bank account balance that nobody sees must become more important to you than the car in your driveway that everyone notices. This is not about living a life of deprivation or avoiding all pleasures. It is about being intentional with your resources, about choosing to spend on things that truly matter to you while avoiding the countless expenses that add little value to your life. True wealth gives you options, security, and freedom that no amount of expensive possessions can provide. Number 10, the hedonic treadmill. You believe that reaching a certain level of wealth would bring you contentment, that achieving a specific financial milestone would finally provide the security and satisfaction you have been seeking. Instead, you have discovered that each goal achieved simply raises the bar for the next goal, that success breeds not satisfaction, but an even more intense hunger for more success. This is the cruel joke that wealth plays on those who pursue it without understanding its psychological effects. The very drive that enables you to accumulate money also prevents you from ever feeling that you have accumulated enough. You are running on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, working harder and harder, but never arriving at the destination of contentment. The hedonic treadmill operates by constantly adjusting your expectations upward as your circumstances improve. When you had little money, you imagined that financial security would come from having enough to pay your bills without worry. Once you achieved that level, security seemed to require enough money to maintain your lifestyle without working. Once you approached that goal, true security seemed to require enough money to maintain any lifestyle you might want. At each stage, the goalposts moved further away, and the definition of enough expanded beyond what you had previously imagined possible. This pattern destroys not only your contentment, but often your relationships, your health, and your integrity. Bernie Madoff was already a multimillionaire when he began the Ponzi scheme that would eventually destroy him. He had achieved more financial success than most people could imagine, yet it was not enough. The treadmill demanded more, and he was willing to risk everything he had built in pursuit of that more. Madoff's story is extreme but not unique. History is filled with wealthy people who had already achieved financial security beyond any reasonable measure, but who continued to pursue more wealth through increasingly desperate and destructive means. The transformation begins when you realize that the feeling of enough will never come from accumulating more money. It can only come from consciously defining what enough means to you, and then having the discipline to stop pursuing more once you reach that definition. This requires a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that is rarely discussed in conversations about wealth building. You must examine not just your financial goals, but the psychological needs those goals are meant to satisfy. You must distinguish between the security that money can actually provide and the security that exists only in your imagination. Most importantly, you must develop sources of meaning and satisfaction that are independent of your net worth. The treadmill loses its power over you when you have other ways to measure progress and achievement in your life. The practical application is to define your enough point explicitly and in writing, not just how much money you want to have, but what that money is meant to provide for you. What lifestyle it should support, what security it should offer, what freedom it should create. Once you define enough, you can begin to organize your life around reaching that point rather than constantly moving beyond it. You can start to derive satisfaction from approaching your target rather than from raising your target. The wealthiest life is not the one with the most money, but the one where enough money has been accumulated to support everything that truly matters, and where the accumulation of more is no longer necessary for happiness. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a vast ocean at dawn. The waves before you represent every financial decision you will ever make, each one carrying the potential to either carry you toward your true destination or pull you further from shore. But now you see something you could not see before. The ocean is not your enemy. It is not random chaos designed to destroy your plans. The ocean has patterns, rhythms, currents that have been flowing for centuries. The waves that seemed so threatening when you did not understand them now reveal themselves as opportunities for those who have learned to read the deeper movements beneath the surface. This is what happens when you truly grasp the psychology of money. Your relationship with wealth stops being a battle against external forces and becomes a dance with internal wisdom. You realize that every financial choice you make is actually a choice about who you are becoming, about what kind of future you are creating, about how aligned you are with the deeper currents of time and human nature. The numbers in your bank account become less important than the person looking back at you from the mirror. The investments you choose become less significant than the patience you develop while making them. The wealth you accumulate becomes less meaningful than the wisdom you gain while building it. When you understand that money is psychology before it is mathematics, you stop fighting against your own nature and start working with it. You stop trying to become someone else's version of successful and start building your own definition of enough. If you are ready to continue this journey of understanding, to keep exploring the deeper patterns that govern not just money but life itself, join the thousands of others who have chosen to walk this path of true transformation by subscribing now. Your relationship with money is your relationship with time, with patience, with yourself, and that relationship continues to evolve with every choice you make.